Okay, Mr. Harrison, CPC 259-12.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
out of respect to the process, I will again err on the side of caution and recuse myself at this time from this review. Thank you.
Francis, are you ready? Mr. Harrison, you have 15 minutes to present your case regarding the citizen complaint 259-12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Check. Okay. Once again, I would ask that Commissioner Foster also err on the side of caution and recuse himself in this case. Saying that, I will go ahead because obviously he's not going to do that. Do you all have the investigative file on this? Do you? Could I bring your attention to, in that investigative file, there is I believe he's called it a investigative note by the investigative, Chris Davidson.
Page number 5.
Excuse me?
What's the page number 5?
I have no idea. My page numbers are all different than yours. There's in his investigative file, there's an investigative note. It's 2 paragraphs, and it concerns another CPC. I can read it to you if you like.
Page 27.
Mine was like page 6 or something.
Okay.
Okay?
You have investigative note.
Okay. If you take a look, in the information packet that the independent review officer, Ms. Robin Hammer, sent me, you will find this investigative note by investigator Chris Davidson. I don't know quite how you should handle this, but I won't say the CPC number. How's that? The investigative note says this case also coincided with CPC such and such, in which such and such complained of a marked Albuquerque police vehicle not having a government plate or temporary tag displayed. In that case, the findings of Mr. Such and such were corrected that state law requires all vehicles must display a license plate or a temporary tag. There is no exemption for police or emergency vehicles under the law. State statute 6318 requires that every vehicle operated on the highways of the state shall have a license plate or valid temporary tag displayed. It is against the law to display a temporary tag that has expired. And in the second paragraph, it says, however, in this case, Police Department General Order 119.9 states all department vehicles except SID must have a G plate. SID refers to Special Investigations Division, I suppose, which consists of narcotics and burglary and all that. Also, Albuquerque Police Order 119.10 states all personnel driving marked or unmarked department vehicles will have an assigned government plate properly affixed to their vehicles at all times, with the only exception for undercover units such as SID, Vice, NARCS, Intel, such as that. I must say I'm astonished at the thinking displayed by the investigator, Chris Davidson, and then promoted by the RO, Ms. Robin Hammer, who is a licensed New Mexico attorney. So much so that it deeply concerns me is that obviously they're both suffering from delusion that has clouded their objective cognitive abilities to a point that they actually believe Albuquerque Police Department orders usurp state law. APD, SOPs, general orders, chief special orders, and policies and procedures are not law, never have been, and never will be. I contend that Chief Banks, the IROs, and the investigators' application of these orders 119 119.9s B and 119.10U are bogus, as these orders never claim to give approval of driving an undercover car without a tag of some sort. All they say is that they don't need a G tag or that it be properly affixed, as the investigator clearly states in his report. Another apparent prime example of this poor application of department rules that gives the appearance of this being a systematic problem within APD is where they fail to abide by the law in the city and of Albuquerque because of APD's collective idiocy, paid out a large sum of taxpayer dollars for violating the civil rights of people when they were illegally detained as innocent witnesses to crimes. We all heard about that recently. I am sure that APD must have, like other police departments across the nation, a system of supplying license plates for undercover cars that is, as it should be, closely guarded. If they don't, then their only excuse must be that they are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on boondoggles such as the Real-Time Crime Center. It appears that the lack of common sense at APD has infiltrated the IRO staff and permeated the IRO's mind to think for one moment that a vehicle could be driven around on the public streets without any way to identify it. It is best asinine and at worst insane. And in this particular case, that it would be justified when this supposedly cloaked SID vehicle was parked by Officer B in broad daylight at the APD headquarters in the police car parking only section on 4th Street that day, and not in the city's underground parking garage not more than a half a block away. Due to Officer B's laziness and disrespect for not only the law, but also the driving public at large, the value of that brand new undercover car is most likely gone. And I say driving public due to the fact that anyone seeing that car without any identifying tag would no doubt be a distraction that could result in them having an accident. Commissioners, I ask you to take a hard look at the narrative of my original complaint and overturn the obviously incomplete and incompetent conclusions made by the investigator, Mr. Davidson, and the IRO, Ms. Hammer, in this case. And I also ask you, but not limited to, you look at all the APD rules that were spelled out for them in my complaint for violations all the way up the chain of command of the officer in question here. Again, in closing, I ask that the Commission pass a non-binding resolution as soon as possible, amending the immediate resignation of the IRO and the investigator, Mr. Davidson, for highly possible felonious violations of New Mexico State Statute 1016-3 by their failures to perform the duties of their officers if they those have blatantly shown their bias in favor of APD by ignoring the concrete evidence right under their noses, contrary to their predetermined exoneration of Officer B and his superiors at APD in this case. This Commission can no longer tolerate being looked as a laughing stock due to the unskilled and unlawful actions of the IRO, her staff, or APD. And once again, I ask that this statement be placed in the record verbatim. Thank you.
Is there any question for Mr. Arison? Commissioner Shine.
It's not a question, it's just a statement. Mr. Arison, you make it very difficult for us to respond to your appeal when you make the kind of ad hominem, unnecessary attacks that you do on everybody involved in this process. And I just, it's your right, you want to do it that way, but I'm just telling you that for me personally, you make it very, very difficult, sir.
I understand, sir. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. You may sit.
Thank you.
Is Detective B here?
No.
Okay. Then we'll move to Lieutenant Jordan, the APD. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. It's common law enforcement practice for while officers are in an undercover capacity involving undercover operations to actually technically break the law. And what I mean by that is, we have officers that will attempt to recruit prostitutes. We will have officers that will sell drugs. We will have officers that will try to buy or sell illegal weapons in the course of their investigations and normal operations. In the course of these undercover operations, they may also have to drive vehicles illegally without having a license plate displayed. These are normal operations. We do have SOPs that cover this. In this case, too, this was also a new vehicle that had just been assigned to the fleet and had not been used in an undercover capacity yet, but was going to be used in undercover capacity. So as I stated before, this is a common law enforcement practice to conduct these operations and to, when we have to, violate the law in those sense. We don't prosecute the officers, for instance, while they're engaging in a prostitution operation or a narcotics operation for those type of activities. These are best practices that are done by agencies all over the country, not just in APD. Now I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Commissioner Shine.
I agree with you fully that under many circumstances, officers have to engage in conduct which if engaged in by a citizen would be a crime, like buying narcotics or whatever. The question, though, is in terms of this issue, a temporary license plate. Let me ask it this way: are the undercover vehicles that the police generally, the undercover vehicles the police department uses, do they not have some kind of tag? Not a government tag, obviously, but ridiculous to have an undercover vehicle with a government tag.
Yes.
But do they have?
All of our vehicles, if they are fully marked units.
No, I'm not talking fully marked.
Let me finish my answer, sir. All of our vehicles, from fully marked vehicles to the unmarked vehicles to the undercover vehicles, have some type of registration or plate assigned with them. So, yes.
Okay, and obviously you can perform an undercover operation, except perhaps in very unusual circumstances, with some kind of plate on it. It's not going to be a government plate, but it'll be some kind of plate on the vehicle, right?
Depending on the circumstances and the type of operations we are conducting.
So my concern here is the temporary tag. And we had another CPC today that involved temporary tags, in which a marked vehicle, as you're probably aware, a marked vehicle didn't have a temporary tag, and it was a problem because the tags were expiring in 30 days before the motor vehicles, because their backlog can get the regular tags out to the police department. And as a result, the police department worked out a procedure whereby the temporary tags can be extended by the police department itself, and for another 90 days or something like that. You're familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here, maybe the problem was that the temporary tag was expired and they were still waiting for the Department of Motor Vehicles, but the answer is not that they don't have, there shouldn't be a temporary tag on it, not that it's undercover, it's that there's a procedure now in effect to eliminate this problem with the police department issuing temporary tags that are longer in duration. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know if it's appropriate to answer, since that's also a pending CPC that's coming up later in the hearings that you're referring to.
Oh, I'm sorry. We haven't done the CPCs yet. Okay. Well, let me put it this way then. Is it not fair to say that even though this is an undercover car, ordinarily it should have a temporary tag and eventually will have a regular plate on it? Is that a fair statement?
As I stated before, sometimes we put the tags on the vehicles and operations, and sometimes we don't, depending on what activities that are taking place at the time.
Do you know whether this vehicle in particular was one that wasn't supposed to have a tag on it, or shouldn't have a tag on it? What do you know?
I don't know, sir.
Thank you very much.
Are there other questions? Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Lieutenant. You stated that you have SOPs that cover this type of situation. Is there an SOP that covers this situation?
Reference to 1-19-9 that talks about the plate that they're not required to have the government plates, and we've interpreted that as plates.
119-9 states all foreign vehicles must have a G plate. All right.
Yes, it is, sir.
Commissioner Shine.
Okay, so what we're not talking, the reason I don't believe that even applies here is because we're not talking about a G plate. It's supposed to be on its car, right? If anything, because it's an undercover car, it would be an ordinary plate, not a government plate.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Move to Ms. Hammer. 10 minutes.
Both under New Mexico Supreme Court law and U.S. Supreme Court and 10th Circuit law, on all three of them, the law of the land, is well established that undercover operations are exempt from the law. In the 10th Circuit, United States versus Mosley, citing U.S. Supreme Court law, the 10th Circuit held that government agents often need to play the role of criminals in order to apprehend criminals. And this role occasionally entails unseemly behavior. Wide latitude is accorded to the government to determine how best to fight crime, citing a U.S. Supreme Court case. New Mexico Supreme Court in State versus Vallejos also held that the police are permitted to play the role of criminals in order to apprehend criminals, participating in a crime they are investigating, or using deception to gain the confidence of suspects. It's well established that while in undercover operations, they can violate the law. There are due process limitations so that the outrageous conduct is not permitted, and there are standards for that. But what we have here is a case of an officer who was working undercover, and as undercover, he had a vehicle which did not have a license plate. And the officer told that to Mr. Aronson even, that as an undercover officer, there are exceptions of the law that that he did not have to apply, that he was exempt from. And one of those things is that he was permitted to drive a car without a license plate in order to further his undercover activities. The SOPs that was cited talks about G plates are required with the exception of cases that are for cars that are undercover. That's why it was cited. So this car would never have a G plate. The law also permits this car to have no plate. So there was no violation of the SOP, which is what we look at, and there certainly was no violation of the law, because as an undercover officer, this officer would be permitted to buy cocaine, and he would be permitted to drive a car without a license plate if it were part of his undercover operation. And this officer was an undercover officer, explained that to Mr. Aronson when Mr. Aronson confronted him, and it was videotaped that was the officer. That's what the officer's operation was that he was undercover, and that was the reason why he didn't have a license plate. So I'm asking you to deny the appeal and uphold the letter.
Is there questions for Ms. Hammer? Commissioner Shine.
Ms. Hammer, you're not suggesting that because someone's acting undercover, they can commit any criminal offense?
There are limits.
And
That's all I'm asking. I'm just saying there are limits of standards which are set forth by the Supreme Court of both the United States and New Mexico.
And in fact, this car had a temporary tag on it, did it not, at one point? The lady was expired? That's why it had the tag in the glove compartment?
That's why he put it away, yes, he did.
Because it expired, right?
Well, that was one reason, and he could have had other reasons.
I did not, all I know is in the record. What's in the record is he put it in the glove compartment because it expired. Isn't that what's in the record?
What's in the record is a question of, is it a violation of the law? And I'm saying that it's not a violation of the law.
Ma'am, what's in the record is the officer said that he put it in his glove compartment because it expired, which means that the temporary tag was on there at one point, and therefore it was not off his car because he had an undercover operation he had to protect. It was in his glove compartment because it was expired. And the problem we've got here is the same we have in another case, and that is,
Let's not refer to the other case, please.
what we've learned is that the department has trouble with these plates expiring in 30 days, and that's the problem. I'm not
The question
suggesting,
is whether
let
or
me
not,
finish, Ms. Hamel. I'm not suggesting by any means that we should in any way find this officer in the wrong or punished or anything else. I'm saying we've got to be straight up and honest about how we deal with these, and I don't think citing the G plate as SOP does that, because this car should have had a temporary plate, and the reason it didn't have a temporary plate is because of a problem with the bureaucracy and the Department of Motor Vehicles, not with this officer. So he should certainly not be held responsible for it, but we do have to be straightforward in how we deal with the problem.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Shine, perhaps it's believed that the appropriate SOP is follow the law. We can modify the letter to include the SOP in addition to or in lieu of follow the law, because that's what this officer did. That's what the officer's statement was to Mr. Aronson when asked, why don't you have a plate? He says, I'm exempt because I am working undercover. That's in the record, and that's what was appropriate in this case, in that there are other facts and other cases which have to do with license plates. I stipulate to that. But in this case, we're looking at, did this officer have a lawful authority to drive a car without a license plate? Under the New Mexico Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court, he clearly does.
Are there other questions from any other commissioners? Okay, I will entertain a motion. No, wait a minute, we're not there yet. We need to hear a rebuttal. Mr. Harrison, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see nothing in the record that there was any claim that the officer was in an undercover operation at the time. And once again, the vehicle was parked in the police-only parking spot, clearly marked for police vehicles only, right next to ABQ headquarters. So I cannot believe that he was using that vehicle in an undercover operation at the time. So is this something that they can do all the time? And what if they're, I assume they drive these vehicles home or whatever, I'm not sure, but what if they're, say, just going to lunch during an undercover operation and they've left that scene and they're simply going to lunch? What if they have a little fender bender with somebody and just drive away? What is that person supposed to do to identify that vehicle? Once again, the state law says there's no exemption for police vehicles or emergency vehicles under the law. I'm at a loss here. There's just too many issues with all of this. You simply cannot be driving a vehicle without some sort of identification on it for the driving public to identify that vehicle. If it was speeding, if it cut somebody off, ran a guy on a motorcycle off the road, like I had happened to me about 4 years ago, the same situation. So I'm afraid this just doesn't make any sense. There needs to be a tightening up of the rules. And the law says what it says, as it was at this time of the situation, and I see nothing in the evidence that this officer was in an undercover operation at the time. So, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion on the floor? Is anyone ready to make a motion? Mr. Bartlett?
I move to accept the letter as submitted.
So you move, we deny the letter, deny the appeal and uphold the letter.
I have the appeal.
And Commissioner Foster, you second that? Now, is there a discussion on, Commissioner Barella?
I just want to say that I'm going to vote against this motion, and I agree with Commissioner Shine. It's very clear in the letter that we were given that the detective stated he removed the temporary tag because it was expired, not because he was undercover capacity.
Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Shine?
Yeah, I'm also going to vote against the motion because I think the rationale is a fictitious one. It was an undercover operation. I think it was just a bureaucratic screw-up, and it should be dealt with up front as that.
Any other comments? Okay, ready to vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Okay, 3, and all against? Okay, so the process now, it goes to the Chief Administrative Officer, is that correct?
No, fails.
It's not.
The rules provide in the case of a tie, the IRO's letter stands.
Okay. All right.
No, wait, does the rule provide that? Where's the-
Anybody find the rule? Okay. If the POC votes on the appeal into the tie, the findings of the IRO remain the final findings. That is, according to our rules, it's it's section 6J. Okay, so the appeal is denied, and the letter stands.